Hi, everybody. So we are back with another session with San Angels. Today, we are tackling one of the hot topics in the startup investment area, which is patents. And do we really need patents when it comes to investment? What do investors think about patents and intellectual property rights in general? So we have our IP expert, our growth partner too, Govind Kedia. Govind is the managing director of Arctic Invent, and he's also a growth partner with San Angels. He advises startups that come to us for investment regarding their intellectual property rights and how they can protect and use the intellectual property that they have to get better investment, get better markets, etc. And we have Shriram. He's one of the co-founders of San Angels and a prolific investor himself. So he'll be representing the investor side of the equation here and trying to help us all understand this entire, area about how this patent and IPR actually impacts his investment decisions overall. So let's get started. Going to you first, right? And Shriram, feel free to jump in, when you find it appropriate. So how important is it having a strong patent portfolio overall, for a startup when it comes to attracting investments, and what's been your experience around that?
Sure. No, thanks, Anu, for first of all for having me, and really pleasure to be part of San Angels growth partners, and also come and talk about topic which is of course what I do and also close to my heart. Now the question about having a strong patent portfolio. See, think about it that if we are as a startup, coming and going and raising rounds, and they have created something, right? It's like creating a house, and then of course investor will look at, okay, what have you done to protect that house? Is it really valuable or not, right? So of course having the first element of patent protection or any kind of IP conversation is about what have you developed, right? Investors are always looking for something very interesting that people have developed as a deep tech startup or any startup business, right? And one of the things that is a kind of marker for that is that how you have protected that creation, right? And patent is of course one way to protect your creation, and that's why it is like always a conversation of having patents, strong patents. So once there is an idea, there is a creation of business, then of course this conversation of patents automatically comes in, because it's also how you're protecting that creation, right? So that's why it is very, very important for investors' point of view that, hey, you have developed some business, how you have protected that entire business or entire technology. And that's why this conversation is important. And that's what attracts investors, that, okay, there is something which seems to be interesting. There is some value, there is some protection around it. And that's how, investor typically starts their first level of interest, right? It's also a very interesting elevator pitch that, hey, think about it. If I'm a deep tech startup doing something in a very, very innovative area, what kind of conversation you would like to have with investors? Hey, I have developed this, but I don't have any patents. I don't have any protection. Or, hey, I have developed this. I also got some patents on my side. So, hey, there is a evidence that I have created something very, very interesting, very, very valuable as such, right? So that's the kind of conversation which happens in aspect of strong patent portfolios and in terms of attracting the investors' interest, so to say. But I would love to hear what Shriram thinks, being a prolific investor himself, how he looks at.
Well, prolific is only a statement. Hello, everyone. Thanks, Anup. Thanks, Govind. See, typically at San Angels, when we look at, assessing or addressing a startup, the theme goes that in addition to B2B, the founders, everything, what specifically stands out is the tech that we address. So tech enabling startups is what, in our opinion, the substantial scope for growth. So in terms of tech, then we look at what differentiates. Are you an also-ran, or are you someone who has addressed something new? How do you differentiate and stand away from the crowd? So these are some of the things that we look at initially. The other way, when we are assessing a startup, again, is what are the entry barriers, right? So I develop something, I make it successful, and like how you kept pointing out, you said if it's not protected, some are deep pockets, or or a better team, or a combination of that, could take the business away from you. So technically, you could be left twiddling your thumb. So that is where patents, how to protect your business, how to business ideas, how to ensure that competition is fair and addressed, and that is how what investors would typically look at when you say patents for startups. I mean, that's how I would, at least thought process is, when we look at this at a very initial stage, these are the things that we would look at.
Sure.
So from a IP perspective, Govind says it's a good way to get noticed and stand out. And what Sriram is saying is it's a good way to signal that there's a barrier to entry. And it's not that somebody with deeper pocket or bigger teams will be able to just enter and capture the market because you hold the keys to the tech at some level, right? It's interesting to look at it, and I kind of dabble in both the sides. So my perspective has been there's a little bit of a hand waviness around IPR overall. Some people say, oh, very, very important, therefore let us get it done because our primary markets are different. And on the other hand, some startups are like, chalta hai, it doesn't matter really. Nobody's going to come to my company and steal it any which way. But what people don't understand about patents probably is it's not about stealing your tech. It's not about coming to your company and taking it out and going out in the market. It's about your ability to stop somebody from doing something similar. The way patents are structured, they are not protecting this narrow thing that you are implementing today. It is actually protecting the overall bigger theme itself. Let's not call it just an idea, but the technology area itself that you are trying to develop in. And the broader the patent is written, the way it is written, the more area you can protect. So if your competitors trying to circumvent your exact implementation or exact, tech is not the only thing that matters here. What matters is that overall area, somebody else trying to, do something better than you, version 2.0, version 3.0, you're kind of stopping that. You're kind of putting a barrier to entry. You're blocking that. It's very important to understand the way patents work. It's not just my tech, the way I took it to market, but it's also the future of this tech and surrounding areas of this tech, where all it can proliferate, and what all other areas, what all other things can you do with this technology itself, right? Also, barrier to entry, yes, that's what the investor is looking at first, right? But there's also another factor when you go to, let's say, Series A, Series B, etc., or let's say your business is not doing as well as it's supposed to do, then it's also an asset class. People don't, kind of neglect it, saying that, hey, what's the value of this? Valuation has to be done. It's not a tangible asset. It's not a building. It's not a piece of land you're sitting at. But there is a value to the patent. And at some point of time, if you want to, let's say, offload certain assets, patents can also be offloaded as a sale or even as licenses. You can license it to some other people who want to develop technology in similar area and earn royalties from them. And it's all legal, by the way. It's all part of the law in multiple countries. So do not take it for the face value or just a tick box in a due diligence checklist. It's much more than that. And patents matter at different stages of the company's growth. They don't just matter at the initial level where you're trying to get some investment. They also matter as your company grows. We'll talk about it a little later. But let's look at some success stories, right? I mean, Govind has definitely dealt with so many of them over the years. Now, Govind, to you, do you remember or do you have some success stories handy that you can tell us about where, the company leveraged their intellectual property rights to get investments, to attract the attention of the right investors, let's say, or benefited from having an IP portfolio overall in their growth?
No, absolutely. I think there are multiple stories, and of course, there are always success stories and failure stories, both the sides, right? I think there. I'm also watching the question, so I'll also address one of the question by Aditya here. But of course, success stories I have seen many, where companies have where we have worked with a company based in India, and they had a very large portfolio of patents around AI, blockchains, and they raised around 100 million or so, right? And one of the key factors when they went on to raise money was patents, right? And investor did care about that hey, this is very interesting, and there is some residual value to it as well, right? That there is some form of IP, some form of value storage or value attribution asset that I can actually use to value the company. And I think there's this thumb rule I've heard is that a lot of Western VCs typically have one family is equal to 1 million when there is a large round of fundings as well, right? So typically that success stories I've also seen. On a early stage startups, what I have seen that most of the time when you are going and raising the money at very early stage, investors are not bothered that okay how they are at a stage of evaluating technologies that okay how good the technology is it really something which is unique, or is it something that is just something which has been in a old thing in a new box, old wine in a new bottle, right? So when there is some patents around the technology, there is again a signaling, and there is some belief which creates a value around the business, right? And of course, as one of the question is by Aditya that they hold patents, but investors don't care about it. So it's also important to communicate that well, that okay what aspect of the business, and I think that's the part of the success story I want to also share, that when you are creating these IPs, IPRs, patents around your business, it's also important to communicate it well. What aspect of your business is covered by those patents? How will you actually find it out? How will you really use it? Most of the time, I have seen startups not using that in a well established manner as well. So that's also something I would recommend uh, is to also create a story around your IP. When you are pitching your deck, have a story of your IP as well, and also emphasize on its value. If you don't tell it, then people won't know it, right? So yes, some people will care, some people won't care. And I think, Anup, I also want to build on what you said about, some people said, I don't care, chalta hai. And there's some people who are really careful. It's like having a house, and I don't want to lock it because I believe world is fair, and I don't want to lock my house. And then but what's the reasonable way? The reasonable way is to put some locks, right? Yes, if somebody wants to steal it and they have a force of nature and they want to really rob you, they will rob you at any which way, right? But would you not lock your home just because you believe that there's always somebody who will point a gun at me and then steal everything? So what's our mindset about our business is also important in this case, right? So, and that's what I would want to emphasize in the success stories, that how a lot of companies where I have seen success, the success was they were able to communicate that value of IP to their investors and also create a more impact using those stories, using telling that, hey, this patent claim is important. This is the way we have granted. Of course, that where the quality of patents will also, of course, we will talk about it later in the conversation, but that's also come in the picture, right? How well it is written, how well it is articulated. That's also important in the success stories of these, in these companies as well. So I would say success stories, many, I think in the software space I have seen in the medical and biotech has been long list is there, but even in the software and tech space, robotics space, there are a lot of success stories where people were able to generate a lot of value for their investors based on their IP itself, right? So that would be my take on that.
Yeah. So what Aditya actually asked, this interesting question. He is in the water purification technology, old technology area, right? Now, patents can happen, or technology development itself can happen at multiple levels, right? I mean, I'll take water purification as one example. I have some history there. One of the things is you can talk about the membranes that you're working with, right? Membrane fouling, membrane issues, membrane lifetime term of the membrane, wear and tear, material usage, cost, etc., etc. And these are home water purifiers, right? Industrial scales are different. So you have one level is that, where you're talking about the primary technology of reverse osmosis itself. You have another level where you are saying, okay, this is a machine which has a reverse osmosis and multiple other things, the machine is intact. Now, on top of that, I am, let's say, using steel to make my case for the entire water purifier system. It's an incremental improvement. It's slightly incremental. It allows you to brand it really well, put it out in the market and saying, hey, no plastic parts being used. But the value of the patent itself is fairly low because it's not a barrier to entry for your competitors. The competitors can still sell their plastic and their, gold-plated or copper-plated, device. So what is happening is at how many layers is the patent at? If it is the layering is at the very bottom, the base technology itself is where the patent works. Then your competitors can't just steal and run with it. For example, solar technology, right? You today come up with a better photovoltaic cell that it performs much better. Let's say 30%, 40% better because you have better material or better way of depositing the material on a film. And suddenly what you will see is your competitors can't steal that technology. And that layer of material which you're depositing is the primary thing. Whether you sandwich it on top of it with a glass or something else and how you lay it out, all that is secondary. Beyond that, because it's a second layer, third layer, fourth layer, right? By the time a technology comes to a consumer, it has like 6 layers or 7 layers within which it is packaged. When you look at a cell phone, for example, right, the basic communication 4G or 3G communication layer is never seen by you. It is buried inside the phone until unless you open the phone and find the antenna and then figure out the coding behind it and all that. You will never see it. Technology is usually buried within the utilization by consumers. And at what layer the technology works, if it is at the very top layer where consumers can actually touch and feel and interact with it, then I would say it's very incremental. Right? The second part, and that's another hat I wear usually, which is a marketing hat, about what Govind said, communication. When you go to an investor and say, I have a patent, waiving a patent is not enough. I mean, yeah, great. But what is the business? Because the investor is not investing in your patent. They are investing in your business. And you have to prove that there is a merit for the business, right? You may have 30 patents, 50 patents, doesn't matter if you have 0 sales. At the end of the day, somebody has to purchase what you're selling. And in the market, if there are 20 other competitors selling competing things, and what you have done is so incremental that competitors can always beat you with a brand or with better marketing, you don't stand a chance even with 50 patents in your hand. What you have to, at the end of the day, investors are investing in businesses because they want 10x, 100x, 1000x returns from you. They are taking a huge risk because 9 in 10 businesses will fail within 3 years. So they are putting their hard-earned money on the line, assuming that this business, or rather, evaluating that this business is going to give us returns because there is a advantage that others don't have. And that's my take on it. From a marketing perspective, if you see communication, of course, I can probably write volumes upon it, how startups mess up communication. A simple communication thing is, rather than going with saying that, by the way, we have a 100 crore market. We have already done sales worth 1 crore over the past 1.5 years. Now we are looking for funding because we want to grow this rapidly. We want to, start selling in multiple other geographies. We need presence there. And if you're worried about others taking over the market, don't worry. We have patents to protect our technology. The communication is in this layer. It can't start with, we have a patent, therefore fund us because we will be great. No, it doesn't work like that. It has to be market first. Sriram, over to you. I mean, continuing that thought. Please unmute yourself.
So as an investor, if you look at it, the group, again, when it comes to very early stage, if you remember, we had discussed this in our previous sessions. Friends and family don't typically look or bother about patents. They look at the founder, they know him or her, and they feel, it's worth taking a punt on. Only when the startup matures and comes to angel funding, angel round of funding, or institutional angel funders, there people understand the concept or the value of what a patent is and how it protects the startup. Directly also, how it protects their investment. At the same time, it should grow. Like how you said, a 100 crore market, 1.5 crore you've done over the 1.5 year period, and wanting to grow. If you had 30 patents and had zero sales, it has no meaning even to an investor, because the product market fit itself is missing. So at various stages, an investor would look at patenting differently. When it comes to a slightly higher round of funding, let's say a Series A or a Series B, you are competing against larger enterprises, corporates. So again, the investor, while he or she evaluates the business model, sees what kind of business is there, what kind of market is available. At the end, looks at the patents that are also there and whether it has been able to protect. It adds a little bit of value at every stage, directly or indirectly. We may not see it very visibly, but at back end it could technically be adding. So somebody who's, as you said, there are my point is that investors do look at what are the entries to that. It may not necessarily be the word patent, trademark, IP, but in different languages, this is definitely covered.
Thanks for that, Sriram. We are seeing a little bit of disturbance at your end, but that's fine. A couple of questions that have come in, while we were discussing. One is from Sambat Kumar. He asked if a startup apply patent in India can use this for abroad. Over to you, Govind.
Yeah. So I'm seeing the questions, so I'll probably take the questions as well. So thank you, Sambat, for asking. But most of the IPs are territorial in nature. So if you apply a patent in India, then you're only getting the rights in India, right? And it is the way the IP is structured, that if there is a US patent, a US technology and not protected in India, you are free to use it, right? So that's how it works, that you have to look at what is your market, right? And also one of the things that I want to build on what Anup said about how the marketing communication, I always say to, when people are talking about, how should I really use it? And then I always say, hey, don't put cart before the horse. But most of the time, what people do is that, hey, I have a patent, give me money. That doesn't work that way. We have always said to all our startups, clients, and that, hey, while we are important, we believe that we are important element in the business, but it is not the other way around. Business is important first. And I think there was one question before we started live from Abhik. When is the right time for a company to get started with patent application process, right? And I believe that the best time is that once you start out your business model, because otherwise there is no clarity of what you're going to do with that, right? Like Anup has said, that there has to be a marketing, there has to be a story, there has to be a kind of line of the logical, everything stacked together makes sense, right? And that's why I don't believe that as soon as you get an idea, you should file a patent. No, I believe that yes, it is important to protect it, maybe by filing some provisional or something, but important is to figure out what you're going to do with that. So I think that is very, very important. A lot of times, people forget about it, and also in the rush of that, hey, nobody should steal my idea, forget about the business elements, right? So I always believe the best time to file a patent is that once you have an idea, figure out your business model, and you know that what's you're going to be protecting with those patents, then go for it. And I think there were a couple of questions around how to guidance on US patents, being an Indian company. Any advice?
I will, I'll read out the question. It's by Prinkan Pal. Any guidance on filing US patents for AI-based products, being an Indian company? And second one is, any advice on patent lawyers? Shall we be directly approaching US patent firms?
Sure.
Over to you, Prince.
Yeah. So thanks, Prinkan, for posting this question. So for guidance on US patents, of course, my first element of conversation will be that why US? What is the end objective? Are there investor mandates? Are we going there? What is it that you want to achieve out of this US filing? That is something we should establish first. The second is, of course, on lawyers. I think nowadays, even for example, firm like ours, we are doing it from India, being more cost effective, working with the US lawyers, getting a lot of work done here. So it's not mandatory that you go there and use a US law firm. There is always ways to frugally do it by, of course, eventually it will be done by US firms, but in order to make it a bit more easier for you, you can always engage with a local agent here, and then they can help you with these things. And we have been doing a lot of these things for a lot of our startups, because a lot of startups who are Indian and build their solutions for the West. So that's how, it's a very common phenomenon. I'm sure there will be a lot of value of doing it in India than doing directly in US. That would be my take on that. Then I think the next question, shall I read it out, Anup, or you want to? I can take it. I can see the question. So I think next question is by Atul. We have applied patent around B2B lending. Part of it is live in India. Using open finance and AI, will be filing abroad too. How to create collaborations abroad to monetize it? Very interesting question. So I hope that the timeline of patent is also very, very important, that it has to be filed within 12 months. If not, then you have to file a PCT application by the end of 12 months. So without knowing and presuming that you are still in that timeline, sure, I think what we need to understand is which country first you have to define. Abroad, when you say abroad is very big, ambit of countries. Define that abroad. Let's say if it is US, Europe, specific part of US, the Europe, define that. That is very, very important. Then, of course, look at what is landscapes there, how likely that you will go out there and do it yourself, or you are going to collaborate. Right? And then it's, of course, start filing the application and then start the collaboration and hunting for the partners at the same time, or, very, very as soon as you file the patents, right? Because that's very, very important, that once you are again creating these collaborations, patents are elements of that licensing agreement. The underlying technology will have to be there. There has to be some value for the collaborator as well, that it's very, they might not only look and collaborate for you only for patents. They will look for a lot of things beyond your patents. So I think that is something you should also look at when you are thinking about this aspect. Of course, patent has to be filed in a definite market where you are looking for, but also think about how you are packaging this collaboration. It's like a franchising agreement with any other, you are in the franchising world, you have to tell a lot, you have to give a lot more than your name, right? So that's also important in this conversation, I would say, and should be kept in so Atul says we are within timeline planning Singapore, UK, US, Germany. So great. I think, Atul, if you have this clarity, and if you are so always good to have collaborations, discussions as well started in the parallel. That will give you a confidence of putting money in these markets, right? Because as I said, it's not going to be only patent which will help you collaborate. There has to be a lot of elements along with the patents. Patents are critical elements, but think about a lot of other things. I think Anup and Sriram can add a lot of value in this question, because from a business aspect, investor aspect, they can all add a lot of value. So Anup and Sriram, what would you say?
Before moving to Sriram, I'll try to pitch in a little bit. See, again, right, what Atul has asked is in part a business question, in part a marketing question. Why marketing question? Because you have to tell a story to collaborators. Right? Why should they collaborate with you? I mean, you have a patent or you have a technology, so what? So many people have, especially in the fintech area. Every other firm says we have something proprietary. Why you? What is the benefit for the collaborator? I mean, are they going to earn more? Are they going to earn faster, grow faster? There has to be some specific story that you tell them, right? And by story, I don't mean, spinning nonsense, right? It should be genuine. It should be something that you're committing to, but there's a way to tell that, and it can't be just factual. I mean, people sleep when it's a boring, 20-minute talk about facts and figures. You have to spin it in a manner that people understand, appreciate. It has to be a story that they remember and take away. So if there are 3 things you want them to remember, the 3 things have to be told in a manner that they will remember the 3 things where, and not the facts and figures. So Atul, it's part of the problem here is you are looking for collaborators and you're combining it with patents. Not necessary. Collaboration can happen without IPR too. Business matters, right? The second piece around this is you want to go abroad and find collaboration. You cannot do that sitting in India. You have to pick up the phone and start talking to people, or at least fly down and start talking to people if it makes more sense. Because at the end of the day, you are expecting people to invest their time and effort and money with you without building that trust in them. That is a step number 1. Why will I do business with somebody I don't like or trust, or even know for that matter, right? So that aspect also has to be taken care of. Sriram, over to you if you have something to add on that. You're muted.
I think you covered it, Anup. There's nothing to add.
Okay, thank you so much. Right. So there are a lot of questions which will keep coming in, but let's continue. Right. See, one of the things is we have spoken about the common challenges. We have spoken about what needs to be taken care of, and we have also spoken about how patents are perceived, etc. But what about global? This entire international, environment that we're looking at. Atul asked that, Prinkan asked that, the question is not around patents alone. It is the broader market. You're approaching international markets, and naturally, from India, we are going to, let's say, more developed countries or countries which have a higher, GDP, etc., or higher spending power at least. So US, UK, Singapore, Australia, Canada, these places seem very attractive, and they are global markets, they are bigger markets. So what are some of the things that people should keep in mind, especially from the IPR perspective when they go to these markets?
Sure. No, thanks, Anu. I know it's one of the most common questions, and also one of the most ignored aspect when we think about internationalization and globalization. Filing global IPs around different countries, right? I think first is first myth, and I want to kind of first cover is there's nothing called as global patent, right? I think a lot of times people get confused with this, that I want to have a global patent, and there is something called as PCT, which is again not a global patent, just gives you a timeline to have more time to think about where you want to file. Yes, there are some benefits, but again, there's nothing as global patents. Then the question is, there are 2 elements of deciding when you are going and thinking about beyond your current market, say India for that matter, right? First is understanding the entire vision of the business in terms of getting the funding as well, and also the market as such, right? Sometimes you need to be clear that, okay, I'm going to raise my next round of investments from a certain geography or certain kind of investors who are based in certain geography, right? And they, of course, will have always, and your product is established in a market fit in the current market that you are doing, right? 12 months is what you get, and you can, of course, stretch it to 30 months using PCT as a tool, right? So first is that it has to be a bit more vision clarity, that, okay, what is it that we would like to do, right? Should we go ahead and do it? How much it makes sense? The second is what is your current state, right? It's also important that there is an element of, because Western markets, of course, they are expensive, much expensive. Typically if you go in US or different Western economies, you are talking about, you are not talking in rupees, you are talking in dollars, right? And early stage startups, or in the it just startup stage, is very important as well, right? So very, very important two aspects. Again, the vision clarity, and then that what's the current state of the funds as well, right? That if you are going to burn everything on patents without having a clear vision and strategy, again, it's something I'm telling you which is again detrimental to my business, right? uh, but this is the truth, and that's why this session is there, right? So I'm coming out and telling the the ugly side of these things, right? That it's very, very important to first understand uh, what is it that you want to achieve with these international patents, right? Like you said about collaboration and these things, right? So first is that. Second is to understand the commitment to these IPs if you're filing in different countries, right? A lot of times people fail to understand the process, right? In US, it's much longer. There's non-final action. Then a lot of things happen, right? It's very, very important to work with companies who have done this consistently in these markets, have a clarity, and also offer something which is more predictable in terms of cost, right? So you can budget it accordingly, right? And also handhold you not only from the IP legal perspective, but also the business perspective, right? So that's very, very important when we are talking about these global, conversations. Very important is to look from a very long term horizon, because even if you get a patent, maintaining them, you have to pay every year these fees, right? So again, I'm not scaring anybody and not saying it's bad thing. It's all about having a very clear vision of the business, right? And there is always these, as I said, confusions around that, and different countries have different laws, right? So understanding the elements of those elements of cost is very, very important, right? I have seen this coming excited with an idea, hey, let's file in 10 countries, and then as soon as we prepare an estimate, okay, this is there, and then that's like a burn rate for a year for a startup, right? Sometimes that's also the case. I've heard those stories. So that's very, very important, even if it is 1 year burn rate. But if it is, there is a plan, there is a definite use of that, go ahead and do it. I have seen stories, success stories of doing that. But at the same time, like the conversation started, that IP and business go hand in hand. It does not work the other way around, right? It's again, most of the people would not say this, but working with San and working with a lot of startups, I'm kind of coming out and saying this in more vocally than anybody in my industry, at least I believe.
True.
Let's-
So go.
In terms of startups, again, IP is something which forms an asset in the balance sheet of the company. So technically, it depends on how you view the 1 year burn, whether it is an expense or whether it is an investment. That is something which needs to be looked at. Again, as you rightly said, it is over a period of time. First, the business has to kick in, and then you go and see what you protect and how you protect. Even going global doesn't make sense if you're going to be restricted to India. First, you set up a business here, see what kind of customers and clients you have, and if you're looking to expand your horizon, you go and check for to see how your business can be protected in other markets. Anything that is global, international costs, a lot of money. So one has to be prepared that, in India, you could get away with a cost which could be competitive. I'm not saying competitive, but it could be less. Globally, that does not work because you're going to be paying in dollars. And the rates, the negotiating power that you may have, may not be the same as you could be doing it in India.
There was a question, but we'll tackle the question a little later. See, one of the things people need to understand, right? I mean, although we are talking about patents and technology, etc., businesses get funded without patents also. And more often than not, businesses get funded without patents, because not every business is tech oriented. Some businesses, let's say, not to diss on the companies that are doing well in India. A lot of unicorns in India don't have patents. They probably are market leaders because they are first to market, fastest to market. They have a bigger bank account, more burn, etc., bigger runway, etc. So it's not necessary every type of industry, every type of business requires patents. Sometimes you can keep the technology is commoditized. Everybody knows about it. So it's not nothing. You really can't do much by doing something incremental there. And even incremental things gets copied really fast. So it's better to just go to the market and try to be the first or be the fastest in the growth sector. I wouldn't even say first, because sometimes second, third, fourth entry into the market is also fast. So the question about patents and global patents is good, but focus on the business and the growth, right? And Govind is going to hate me for this because I'm saying patents are not needed. But there's another factor which people forget when they go to global markets, especially a market like US, or even the European Union for that matter. One thing you need to understand about US and European markets are, US market is highly litigious. So you start growing in the US and somebody will sue you, saying you have kind of violated our patent. And it happens more often than not. Maybe it's another company which is a competitor. Maybe it is just a patent, let's say, buying entity or non-practicing entity, as it was. So they have a bunch of patents and they just keep suing people. They don't really have a business. But because they have a patent, they can sue you. So when you go to a market like US, what is more important than trying to get a patent there is trying to understand who can sue me.
Yeah.
It's called the freedom to operate. Are you free to operate on that market, legally speaking? And a lawyer or even Arctic Invent can give you a report which says, what are the chances or what are the risks, associated with going to this market. And then you probably want to go and negotiate with those people or pay a licensing fees or buy the patent portfolio out, or whatever makes sense. The costs increase when you get into these markets, not just because you have to pay a higher amount in terms of your, the salary cost and the cost of doing business itself, but also the litigation costs that come across. And at the end of the day, you get sued by a company and you have a couple of $1 billion in the bank and you think you can fight that. Great, go ahead and fight it, but you may not win anything. Or you can buy out the patents wholesale. Please go ahead and do that. That may make more business sense. So it's very, very important to understand that business is not functioning in isolation within only your competitors and your customers. There are other market forces also available, or which can pressurize your business, which can pretty much shut your business down. A market like Europe, which more or less function as a single jurisdiction when it comes to patents, try to understand the violation of patents, blatant violation of patents will just get you thrown out of the entire market. Port of entry is through Netherlands, and the customs department there itself will block your entry into the market because you are in violation of sub patent. You go to a trade show in Germany, for example, and this is a real case, by the way, 12, 14-year-old case. One of the people I know went to a trade show, took the new machine he had, and presented it there. And one of the competitors walked by and looked at the machine. The second day of the trade show, the cops came in and shut his stall down, because immediately there was a case filed which said, you are in violation of one of my patents. They had never bothered to look at patents because, hey, 10, 12 years ago, Indian companies, they were just happy to create something, right, and go to the market. But that was a shock for them. Suddenly, the entire European market was closed down, and they had built this machine specifically for that market because it was a premium thing and it would sell really well. After putting in so much money, effort, and time, they can sell their products there. So more important than am I protected, you need to ask the question, can I do business there? And IPR is one of the important check boxes when you go to market in countries like US and European Union, or even for that matter, even Australia, Canada, and Singapore nowadays. So there are other considerations just than filing patents.
Yeah.
I
also want
to
add, Anup, I think one of the instances that we had, actually, we worked with a startup had was that you must show me that you can you don't violate any of the patents in US, India, and the markets that they were proposing, right? And the fund was actually on the investor was not signing off until they hear and see that data validation and everything. And trust me, we did that exercise and it took us 15-20 days, and we were discussing directly with the attorneys of the investor side, and they were very serious about this aspect. So especially, so when we think about, of course, IP, and we started that conversation from there about how patents are relevant for building that IP. But at the same time, it is also important that are you infringing somebody else? And if yes, then it is even more important that you have to kind of fix it in that ways, right? And also ensure that you are aware of those, and then you design around, and your communication should be such that ways, right? And I love the comment by Anandan that he constantly runs into companies that have exaggerated idea of value of their patents. As an investor, I'm frequently having to talk the patent holder off their delusions. How do you do that without being cruel? So Anandan, with humility, I'll say be kind to them. Because of course, it's business and patents are like babies, right? It's very hard to say your baby is ugly or your baby is not worth, right? And it's of course like an emotional thing for a lot of entrepreneurs, and that's how it is, right? That's why they are doing what they're doing, because they're emotionally attached to what they're doing. So if you have to take my word, and the way we kind of do it is that, hey, first to understand that yes, they will be emotional about it, so be kind to them. The second thing, the way we typically look at it and kind of help the companies on this is that also show them a bit of comparison of what's happening out there, right? What is out there that people have created in their own field, right? And how, so in these cases, data helps. What I have seen that if you talk to them and help them or guide them that, hey, go ahead and check who are the other startups, who are the other multinational, who are the big companies who have created IP portfolios in this, and then help them also create a bit of a map between their product and the patent, right? Okay, what are the patent claims they have and what is the aspect they are covering? That really helps, right? That really helps them to understand and see it from a very data-driven perspective, right? Of course, there will be always emotional angle attached to it. But all I'm saying is not by being cruel, is by telling them and helping them, by guiding them that, hey, why don't you map your claims against your products and see how will people may or may not be able to design around this, right? I think technologists and technologies will understand this, that, okay, yes, it is important that they may not get somebody who will have one-to-one copy, but there will always be incremental innovation. And also, are they infringing on somebody else as well, right? So I think it's a very difficult question. It's also like we are saying that, hey, your startup is not valued as much as you want. So how to tell that without being cruel? So that's how it is with patents at the same time. Anup and Shriram can kind of tell that better because they deal with pitch text on a daily basis. So over to you perspective.
So Shriram, do you want to add your thoughts? This is Anand Rangarajan from Cambridge Capital, and it's I think you have read the question.
Correct.
What's your thought about it?
So I would call a spade without trying to cover things up. At the same time, show why you have merely saying, "Oh, it's not worth it," doesn't make any difference. I would have made my points, at least three or four very strong points. Tell them, "Hey, listen, this is where we feel as an investor. We feel that there is no competitive edge, and so harping or saying that patents are more valuable is something that we would give it a skip. Let's also see how much of business it does, and what you say, if that were to come true, we will join you in your Series A or the next round, even if it's a blockbuster Series B, Series C, at the valuation that you require, because but then you would have established what the patent could be worth. That's how I would approach it, rather than mollycoddling. Yeah, I mean, as you said, you can't bluntly say things that this is ugly or good or bad, or good is fine, or bad or ugly. But again, unless you say that, you would be causing the founder would still be delusional. Again, we also look at a lot of guys come to us and say the patent is in their individual names, right? And then so we ask them, so how is the company going to benefit out of it? So again, that aspect has to be made clear. They'll say they'll transfer it. All those things need to be taken up separately and addressed, because if the value is going to come on patent, then I would do a minute scrutiny of what and how it adds value. So these are the things I would approach a founder in terms of, if I feel that the patents may not be as classic as they would be thinking about.
Sure.
So before we go to Sanjay's question, Sanjay has asked a very interesting one. That is, let's see, where is it? Yeah. Sanjay's question is how much valuation multiple increase for a startup with patent. Before we go to that, I also want to partly touch upon that and touch upon Anand Rangarajan's question, right? See, my answers are very simple. Okay, great. You have a patent, right? What you're saying is a patent portfolio, whatever that is. You basically have something which is unique, which adds value to the end customer, whoever is going to purchase the technology. So what is the price built in? My question is very simple. Let us say your competitor sells the product for $100 and you're saying that something unique is there, and can you sell it for $150 or $150,000, whatever that is, right? So at the end of the day, I do believe that, market is a great leveler. And if you are selling something unique which the customers want, and you have protected that, you have a patent around that, customers appreciate the extra features, extra additional benefits they get because of this unique technology, that should be built into the pricing itself. So if your product, service / platform is not able to sell at a premium in the market because of the unique technology you have brought in, it's not as unique as you think it is. So Anand, to answer your question, I would just go back to the market and say that, hey, why is there no price premium for your product if you have a unique technology? Or, why is there no profitability improvement if it is the efficiency bringer because the technology actually brings down the cost, etc. So either the top line or the bottom line, it has to show impact somewhere. And if it is not showing impact somewhere, and I'm talking about it in the unit cost, unit metrics sense, either the cost of producing the goods or the price of selling the goods, somewhere it has to reflect. And if you're unable to make it reflect in either places, then, well, the technology really is not, appreciated by the market, or the patents are really not appreciated by the market. Otherwise, of course, it's always a good fight between the startups and the investors, right? My startup is worth $1 billion. I have never seen a pitch which says, it's not worth $1 billion for some reason. Let's say it's worth $1 billion, but where is the proof of the pudding? Okay, great. it might be worth $1 billion, but where is it? It has to show somewhere in that balance sheet or in your activities, in your operation somewhere, right? If it is not showing up in anywhere, then, well, it's just a negotiation tactic, I guess. Back to you, Govind, for Sanjay's question. How much valuation multiple increase for a startup with patent?
Sure. I think, Anup, very beautifully put in your kind of the way you have explained is actually what I would have said. So you have stolen my thunder, but again, I still try to add some more points into it. Of course, there has been, Excel ways and Excel as in, valuation ways of doing these things, right? That, like you said, putting the premium, and there are a lot of, case studies, there are a lot of licensing data available in various sources by the industry that, okay, what is a typical license rate? And then how much value of your, if there is a patent on production and you are reducing the cost of production. So there's some inherent value of that, right? Of course, that is there. Then also one of the things that is important to put in the valuation is So there are three scenarios in a startups. That's what I understood, and that's how I look into it. There is first scenario that you start, technology company or a startup. You develop that company for, depending on the industry, 0 to 4 years. You develop that startup, right? Now, in that 4-year period, you will make investments, right? You will make investments by researchers, by doing a lot of development, going back to the market, doing it, validating it, proof, again coming back to the drawing board, refining your products, right? So there are three scenarios. One, after 4 years or along the 4-year journey, you will see that there's no buyer for this, right? The technology is dead. The startup idea is not flying. It is dead. That's one scenario, right? In that case, it doesn't matter how many or how much patent that you have, right? There are two other scenarios. One, you started to accelerate, and then somebody big enough who copied exactly what you have done, and then they have improved something better, and then you kind of go in the waning phase of the in the phase of the business. The third scenario is that you are accelerating and people are coming and copying you, right? Now, in that time, if you imagine the graph which has three of these things, in 0 to 4 years, you are making these investments, right? And when you are in the first or the second scenario, you are going to use your patents or your IP that you have built in, right? And that's is going to be attributed in the valuation, because valuation is always happening in this way, that you are projecting it for the future, right? So the way I see it, that if the startup is going down anyway, there's no value, right? I mean, but there will be an attribution of value that, hey, when we will get successful, right, we will have ability to stop others. So let's put some value to it, right? Of course, there is a question of how many patents, quality of patents, lot of conversations happens. And that's why it is always a portfolio approach. For startups, it's always a portfolio approach. It's never like one patent, two patents. It's always a portfolio of different things to safeguard investments, right? And I think in the deep tech space or in the startup space, a lot of times people talk about residual value, right? So-called residual value, right? Patent is one of that, right? I'm not saying it's the only one, but it's important to have that conversation. And that is how the valuation will be factored. Now, coming my direct, Sanjay's question, how much multiple? I think I have seen this. Usually, investors take approach of history in different industries. Multiples have different, like a service business, you will value different multiples. And so in pharma, for example, the multiple will be as high as, even 50x, 100. I don't know. I mean, it's like there are a lot of studies based on the drugs and the kind of market that you are catering. In the technology business, which is a short cycle, 5-year technology will change, may have a lesser multiple, right? Med devices could have an even longer multiple. So I would say, Sanjay, multiples are dependent on the industry, but I definitely have seen it does increase and impact the multiples when we are valuing a company with some IP and some patents, which is again protecting some aspect of the business, right? Rather than having nothing. So I think that would be my take on this. I know it's not a direct answer, but that's how it is. It's like a art, not a science sometimes, right? So over to you, Sriram and
Sure. So before I hand it over to Sriram, then I just want to make a couple of comments, right? See, patents, again, right, depends on the area industry, like drugs, pharma industry. You're talking about 15, 20 years. Once you have a patent or a series of patents, you're kind of blocking out the competitors and you have exclusive rights for that drug till 20, 25 years. And you are the only one selling in the market. But you're also putting in $1 billion to get that drug, to get the approvals, to do the tests and all those things. It's not easy to make a new drug. You can't just snap your finger and make it happen. Even in the technology area, for example, there are consortium of technology. Certain things become standards, like Bluetooth is a standard, 802 point whatever. I mean, you have wireless standards, you have standards on 3G, 4G, etc. Two standards that I want to talk about, which also tells just because technology consortiums are made, it does not mean standards survive. For example, much before we had streaming services, we had something called as video cassette tapes. And there was a big battle between two groups, two technology consortiums. So there were companies on this side, companies on this side. One standard was called Betamax, and the other standard was called VHS. Now, VHS kind of won out, and that became the de facto standard of the cassette, video cassettes over decades. More recently, and this is the short-term, lifetime of technology, this kind of shows it. You had DVD plus versus Blu-ray. Both are high-density storage devices. None of us use DVDs and Blu-rays anymore. Blu-rays came and kind of went away. I think in 5 years it just vanished. So you had this DVD plus standard, which was one standard of storing, information on these optical drives, and you had Blu-ray. Blu-ray won out. So DVD plus consortium said, okay, we are shutting it down. We will all use Blu-ray. But then suddenly, the world is completely changed. Nobody uses these storage devices anymore. They just vanished, and it's all streaming now. So yeah, I mean, it's like a 10-year, cycle. You had this big battle and the entire technology market changed. Same thing with CFL and LED bulbs, CFLs came and people battled it out and said, CFLs will become the de facto standard. 7 years later, LED bulbs came and the entire inventory of CFL bulbs are still lying in godowns. People don't know what to do with it. So technology changes too fast in various industries. Sometimes the fundamentals of the technology changes so fast that the older one gets obsolete. So your incremental improvement does not matter. And this can be I think this can be a separate session by itself, how technology changes. You can also think of patents and other things, not just the growth of the technology, but even the growth of your company for that matter. When you're a startup, you're scared, oh no, somebody will steal it. But also you want to get an incremental, let's say a multiple on investment. So you talk about patents, etc., as something which will grab the attention of the investor. But as you grow, patents can also become an incentive to improve the performance of your R&D teams. Patents can also become an instrument of negotiation when you are bigger and you want to acquire companies. Patents can also become the biggest barrier to entry for new competitors that are coming in when the markets are getting saturated. So there are so many ways you can use this instrument. It's not just about fear and somebody will steal it. No, there are hundreds of other ways to do it. And we will probably, Govinda and we should probably think of it and discuss and come on, very, very technical session on how to use patents. But that's for a later day. We have passed our, scheduled time. So before we close, I want Sriram to come in and, give his thoughts on use of patents. More important than that, let me ask you a very, very specific question. What advice would you give startups regarding patent strategies, and how they can align it with their investment goals? And have you seen any changes in the landscape, investment landscape over the past 5 years with regards to startups either being more favorable for IPR or less favorable, etc.? Sriram, over to you. Sriram is facing a little bit of a bandwidth issue, so his video is off. Over to you, Sriram.
Yeah, so again, we're touching on what the valuation exercise that Sanjay spoke about briefly. Valuation is made up of a lot of other factors. So how we assign weights would determine where the needle would move in terms of patents. How you mentioned, it could be the technology could change in 5 weeks, is what you mentioned. So how do you assign weights to those kind of things? So I think patent is an important aspect to it, but may not move the needle as much in terms of valuation, unless, as you mentioned, it's got a long period and the phase of growth can be significant. Valuation aspect apart, patenting for an investor, patents do matter, because that's what. So my first question when I'm doing a discovery call for 30 minutes, while I listen to the business model, I listen to the revenue model, I want to understand where the differentiator comes from. I also look how convincing founders are in terms of their entry barrier strategy, which is what could be defined as IP, patent. So I look at how somebody could defend and how critical that aspect is, or have they thought about it. In fact, some of them, when I'm on a discovery call, I ask them, don't you have patent? Can't this be patented? While software need not necessarily be allowed to be patented, at least sow the seeds of thought into the founders as to how they can protect their businesses. That way, they will be protecting the value of their company. That will directly, indirectly protect even the investors. So my 2 cents on how to approach patents would be this.
Thanks, Shriram. Thanks for that input. Govind, closing thoughts from you before we,
Sure.
kind of conclude the session.
Thanks, Anup. And I think again, one of the very, very important element of IP and patents when we look at in terms of startups, right? I always say that there is always this offense and defense, right? So always have a balance of both, right? That there has to be some defensive strategies and there has to be some offensive strategies. Defensive will mean you are not infringing on anybody. You are protecting, you are covering your important aspects of business. And the offensive is that building a value which is long term, which is something which you know that will capture a lot of value, right? So there always has to have a balance. There always has to have a balance of various aspects and facets of business and protection of those using IP, be it patents, trademarks, designs, copyrights, legal agreements and contracts, right? So again, have a holistic view of these things, and also don't fall in the trap of that. If I file 10 patents, 15 patents, of course they are important if they are relevant, but don't also fall in the trap. And again, being from the industry, I'm telling you is that look for alignment between IP and investor interest and business and technology, right? Which is a difficult balance for sure. So always look for a balance between these segment of business, right? And rather than just jumping on numbers, and I much relate to Anandan and what he said, right? So understand that eventually a sound business model is your horse, right? And all these elements are your wheels to make that cart running very fast. Of course, they're very important, right? So it is important to also work on the horse and your wheels and your rider, right? So like, you can imagine that as a vehicle where founder is the person who is running this, right? So again, these are important. This is the way I look at in the business side of it. And of course, having a person who understands these things in a holistic manner is always better than only person who understands how to run a wheel, right? A person who has a better understanding of business running a kind of a similar card will always be more useful than anybody who is just expert in a certain aspect of wheel, right? Of course that helps, but again, my take with startup IP is this, right? That balance is the key, and also offense and defense balance is very, very important, right? I hope it made some sense. I'm trying to be a bit more realistic in that manner, right?
Thank you so much, Govind.
Before a closing remark, Anup, that is the reason why we fall at Sanjays. We fall on second opinion. The kind of inputs that Govind offers, because Arctic has been magnanimous to to help start the startup community by at least giving them an advice on where they are, what kind of things can be patented in their business, and whether there's any patenting where they can do it. So those kind of initial inputs really help startups, and the ecosystem is looked at that much more favorably. Thanks for being on this journey with us, Govind. Sanjays appreciates.
Thank you, Shriram, for having me. Thank you, Anu, for I'm really happy and pleased to be part of And I also want to call out again, Anup, excuse me for saying this, but we keep on doing LinkedIn Live at the Arctic Invent page, and a couple of LinkedIn Lives we have done in the past, on the similar topic where we have got, people who have been there, done that, fairly experienced people talk about this topic as well. So I encourage anybody who liked the discussion to go ahead and also watch those things. But I'm so grateful to you, Anup and Sriram, to be allowing me to be part of the journey, and always happy to be part of startup ecosystem. Thank you.
So just quickly, let me summarize, right? Thanks for being here, Govind and Sriram. So patents are part of the business. You can't say patents are the business. That doesn't work, number one. Number two, they do catch attention of the investors, but the value of the patent has to be built into what you are selling at the end of the day. It cannot be something which is only for the value of your company and not for the value for the customers. Number three, it's not just about patents, it's what you own, but also understand what your competitors own, because certain countries you go into, they will sue you. So understand the journey, understand where your business is going, because you have to protect your business and grow your business. So these are growth engines for your business. They are not just sticks that you use when you require. So think of them very strategically, and they are strategic tools. They are not to be just done because some patent person comes to you and says we'll do it for free, but you are going to invest a lot of time and effort into it. So be careful about it. Have some strategic inputs, whether patents make sense for you, whether they are going to help you grow, and what your ambition, the ambition of your business is. Arctic had done a really fantastic session with Upekha on how to approach international markets, and I would encourage everybody to go and listen to that, because they deal with it in a very, very pragmatic way. So don't worry if you're a company sitting in India, what should I do about the global markets? There are ways to approach that. Sriram, any other thoughts before we close down? All right. Thank you so much. Thank you all of you for being here. And we will catch you next week with another exciting session. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Anu. Thanks, everyone.